Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you Frank and Adriana for the introduction. I am the Regional Program Manager for the Caribbean Hotel Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Action, and to date we have achieved over 200 energy audits, both detailed and walkthroughs around the region. While our concentration has been on Barbados, Jamaica and the Bahamas, we have also done some audits in the OECS islands, Trinidad and Tobago and Dominican Republic. And I am going to be showing you some of the issues that have arisen in both phase 1 and the current phase of CHENACT, some of the findings that we have made, some of the major negatives, the positives, and some solutions to the negatives that we have come up against. And then I will finish finally by telling you how you might get involved in the program if you are so inclined. I'm going to go on by showing you on this first slide here what we discovered is the actual electricity consumption in the Caribbean hotels by end use. And I think it's quite clear from the pie chart that you can see that cooling or air conditioning accounts for almost half of the electricity that's used in hotels across the region. This is not particular to any one island. There are slight variations. Some actually may use more electricity in cooling than others, but generally it is effectively half the electricity goes on cooling. Another 11 to 12% goes on lighting. Guest room equipment usually around 7.5%, kitchen and refrigeration 10 or 11%, and then the other small ones make up the balance. We have tended to concentrate on the cooling, the lighting, the guest room equipment and the kitchen equipment as the areas where we feel that the most impact can be made in the shortest payback period. Hot water and laundry obviously will vary from island to island. In the case of Barbados, you find that most of the hotels would have solar hot water, possibly natural gas, hot water heating with maybe electrical backup. Some of the other islands that don't have solar were probably only using maybe possibly propane gas, or some are using electricity. And that's where you find the variations between the islands. Some of the main things that we noticed over the course of the CHENACT from our initial startup approximately 5 years ago, we've noted that hotels are in the business of selling beds, food and drinks, and tend not to be as technologically minded as they perhaps should be, and are generally way more focused on marketing than they are on efficiency. And it's sad to say, but it is a factor across the Caribbean. Hotels do not see investment in energy efficiency as a priority because, as most of them have said, there's always something more important to spend money on. We have discovered in the course of our audits in the hotels around the region that when hotels find themselves in a position of where they have a positive cash flow, usually they look to perhaps upgrade the lobby, maybe upgrade the restaurant, change out the bathrooms, because that tends to have a much more positive impact on the actual customer. Certainly lights and air conditioners don't necessarily attract more people in the door. However, having said that, you know, a potential 30% savings would create a much more economically viable situation for most hotels if they were able to improve their bottom lines by that amount of money. We found that maintenance contracts were very rarely taken out until something went wrong. Several hotels where we found that they have chilled water systems or even VRV air conditioning systems, even their chillers in their kitchens and that, waited until the equipment broke down before they called in the equipment manufacturer or the equipment maintenance person, and oftentimes by then it was just far too late and the equipment was beyond repair. It comes to mind a small hotel in the Eastern Caribbean that had a chilled water system that had been installed and should have had a life of at least 15 plus years. because of the lack of maintenance and the fact that they waited until it broke down after 7 years, that whole system had to be uninstalled and a new one put in completely. Therefore, the investment that was made was lost. It's something that we see quite regularly, and one of the things that I think we do advise is that maintenance, unless your maintenance people are actually able to look after your equipment, you must from the very start looking at maintenance contracts. We found that the lack of training of hotel staff in these kind of maintenance issues was a problem, and that generally hotel maintenance staff tend to be firefighting rather than actually doing any kind of preventative maintenance. And that does tell on the life of the equipment. Hotels also tend to open as cheaply as possible and then retrofit. Now, while this might be the easiest way, you know, to open and make money and then go back and do all the things that should have been done, it certainly is far more advisable if you're in the position to actually get the additional funds up front to actually do the energy efficiency implementations. It is actually much more economically viable. Maintenance issues in hotels, you know, it's bad. Electrical rooms and found were dangerous to enter. I personally experienced a small hotel in the Eastern Caribbean that had their electrical room next to their wine cellar, and there was a leak from the wine cellar going into the maintenance room. The electrical panels had wires exposed, and when I questioned the water on the floor, I was told, oh, that's only been there a couple of days, but the algae that was growing on the floor actually told a different story. I can assure you I did not sleep well that night, thinking about the 5 very large propane tanks which were attached to the exterior wall. A small fire in there could have blown the whole property, and if this place had been inspected properly, it probably would be closed down. As you can see from the pictures here, you know, those brown wires definitely do not belong in any electrical panel. And where you see repairs done with electrical tape and wires burnt out all over the place, you know, is not healthy in any property. Here are some more photographs. On the left-hand side, you can see the dirty freezer coils. It's very difficult to expect any piece of equipment to work well when the coils are that dirty. They obviously have never been cleaned, and there's a build-up there that did not start today nor yesterday. That started quite a long time ago. You can see on the other side, on the right-hand side there, the main electrical room, just used as the storeroom for anything at all that, you know, it's obviously a room of convenience. And not only can you see exposed wiring there, but you can also see the gardener has left his tree trimmer. He's also left his weed whacker. There's some old cushions left there, people's clothes. This is a place that has to be kept free of all sorts of debris and all sorts of equipment or anything else that is not supposed to be there, because in the event of a fire or in the event of any kind of an electrical problem, somebody needs to be able to get in there very quickly. On my left-hand side here again, I'm looking at a kitchen fresh air supply. I would have to question the health of those staff in the kitchen if they are breathing that kind of fresh air as such, and certainly the quality of the food. That is something that obviously hadn't been cleaned for a very, very long time. On the other side, you can see the split system where the condensing unit is underground, has absolutely been covered what looks like almonds and the leaves from an almond tree, and all sorts of things have been dumped behind the condenser. I see an old bottle, what looks like a bag, and I suspect somebody's shoe in there, as well as a lot of other wires and things that clearly have no business in that place. The energy audit findings, one of the things that we looked at while looking at the energy usage, we also looked at water and the relationship between water and energy. A lot of people don't understand that, or don't know in actual fact, that it takes a significant amount of energy to pump water. And if you have water leaks for whatever reason, somewhere along the line there is some kind of energy being misused in the pumping of that water. Here's the situation of where we have hot water boilers, sometimes used for the production of hot water, sometimes natural gas, and other occasions maybe electric boilers, because some large hotels may need these as backups, or in the case of where they don't have solar hot water heaters, this is generally how water is heated. You can see here quite clearly, if you look to the very top of the photograph, you will see where there's a leak in the pipe and somebody has wrapped a towel around it. Needless to say, it has not managed to stop the leak, as the bucket underneath shows very clearly that there's a significant amount of water being lost in possibly pipes that are leaking water as well. But again, even looking at the tanks themselves, where the rust has built up, clearly have not been maintained and therefore cannot be working as efficiently as they should. One of the most interesting pictures I think I have ever seen in any hotel, 3 switches in the on position with a sign overhead which says solar hot heater switch. The solar hot water heater switches only turn on for 2 hours if needed. Now, as you all well know, that in the case of where the guests start to complain that their hot water is not hot enough or that they're not getting hot water, somebody should be sent to flip the switches. The switches are supposed to turn on the electrical element in the hot water tanks so that the hot water is maintained. They should not be on for more than 2 or 3 hours at any point in time. When the auditors visited this particular hotel, they discovered that these switches had been on for the whole duration of the audit that they had, for the 3 or 4 days that they had been there during the audit. Now, when they questioned the maintenance and asked, why have these switches been on? The maintenance person told them, well, don't look at me. They've been there since I first started to work here. And the auditor asked, how long have you worked here? And was told, I've been here for 7 years. So when the manager, the maintenance manager, was questioned, the answer was pretty similar. When the hotel manager was questioned about it, the hotel manager's answer was, oh, you're going to have to speak to the maintenance. He knows all about that. So managers oftentimes don't know what's happening. Maintenance people don't question in a lot of cases. And people are oftentimes, a little bit afraid to say, well, I'm not going to be blamed for turning that off. God knows what might happen. We need to tell our staff to ask a question. If they don't know why something is constantly on the on position, somebody has to be able to answer the question. In this particular case, it was the electrical element in the hot water tanks was what was heating the water, not the solar panels, because they clearly had not worked for a significant number of years. And therefore, the hotel was paying far more for their energy than they should have been. Here's another example of a hotel which clearly started out with a nice carpet piled high up against the door. And over the years, after many years of wear and tear, the carpet no longer reaches the bottom of the door. So there's a 2-inch gap. This room clearly was cooling the corridor of the hotel. So much air conditioning is lost because doors and windows are not properly sealed. In this case, this door would need to be adjusted or some kind of insulation put in at the bottom of the door to prevent the amount of air conditioning that was being lost out into the corridors so totally unnecessarily. What we did to try to establish what actual usage should be was we did a survey of certain types of hotels, and we had a look to see what they were actually using. Now, since we have actually done this benchmark and we have audited some hotels in Bahamas, for example, we found the majority of hotels there were using way more electricity on their air conditioning than a lot of the hotels in either Jamaica or in Barbados or some of the other countries that we had audited. And one of the reasons for, well, there are several reasons for that. One would be obviously the design of the hotels is different in that a lot of the hotels have enclosed corridors and enclosed lobbies, and so therefore they're constantly keeping them cool. Whereas some of the other islands, most of the islands to the south and most of the islands in the Eastern Caribbean, The hotel lobbies tend to be wide open with the views out to the sea. They tend to have their corridors open, so therefore those areas don't need to be cooled. But what is significant to look at here is, let's look at the lowest figure for the top, let's say for example the greater than 200 room figure of 22 kilowatt hours per guest night, and look at the average figure for the hotels in the 100 to 200 room area. There, that basically is the range of energy usage per guest night, kilowatt hours per guest night, that the majority of hotels should be using. Now obviously the one that you can see, the less than 50, is a boutique hotel that has a spa, has a golf course, has all sorts of different swimming pools, actually has plunge pools in some of the guest rooms, and obviously are using a significant amount, much more electricity than some of the other hotels. But we found that the range of between 22 and say 32 is a good range to be. Now, how to calculate that is, you have to look at your energy bill. Look at your monthly energy use. It will give you a figure of kilowatt hours that you are using for the month. That figure should be divided by your guest nights, and therefore it's important to have proper occupancy figures. Your guest nights means that you have to, every single person, including the 6-month-old baby that is staying in your rooms. It's not just a question of you rented the room to Mr. Smith and the baby have to be included. So therefore we will get a proper occupancy figure of how many room or guest nights there were. Room nights only accounts for the number of rooms. It does not account for the number of guests. And for proper benchmarking, we need to have this figure. So once again, look at your energy bill, take the number of kilowatt hours that you have used in the month, divided by the number of guest nights for that month, and then you will come up with the figure of your kilowatt hours per guest night. And if you are a relatively inefficient hotel, you are going to be way outside, you're going to be north of the 32. Well north of the 32 would be an inefficient hotel. Anything below 13 or 12 or anything like that, generally that applies to hotels that do not have air conditioning. And air conditioning tends to double your usage, especially if you have very inefficient air conditioning units. Water, as I said, is quite a misunderstood utility, and how, as I said before, it takes energy to pump water. We found in our audits in Barbados and most other islands, we did find that the majority of hotels had leaks. Some were fully aware of them, others had no idea about them. We have obviously, you can see a dripping tap. Oftentimes you can hear a leak. Sometimes you can see a patch of grass which is greener than all of the others. But there are times when you cannot see it and you cannot hear it. And oftentimes that's your swimming pool that is causing that one. We found that there was a potential saving of between 20 and 50% in water bills. Now that's quite a significant amount. Interestingly enough, when we did the audits in the hotels in Negril in Jamaica, we found no water leaks. And again, when we questioned that, we found water is often considered a much more precious commodity to people in Negril, because there are times when they don't have it. And secondly, the price of water was actually significantly higher there than it is in some other islands. So it's all a question of really of perception of the value of a commodity. Oftentimes, as we well know, we don't miss the water till the well runs dry. And in some cases, there are some islands whose water supply is so intermittent that they oftentimes are much more careful and much more conscious of what they are using. But we did find many, many hotels with leaking toilets, faucets, pools leaking, and until we actually did an audit and did a readings of the water meters, were not aware. Unfortunately, I have to say, we found 2 hotels in Barbados one of which had a leak which was costing them $250,000 a year plus, and another which had a leak costing them in excess of $330,000 a year. Hard to believe, you might say, but in a large hotel, sometimes this has been accepted because it's been like that for many years. Nobody has questioned it. In the case of the one with the $250,000 leak, when we asked, you know, and pointed this out to them, they were aware of it. But because the leak was under the driveway, it was going to take a significant length of time to dig that up, and they kept on putting it off, only to discover that they had cost themselves a fortune. They could have, during the very low season, decided to dig it up, try to do the work at night time, get it fixed. But these things happen. In most cases, water consumption analysis was not being done. And I'm going to show you in this slide here exactly what I mean. This is the hotel that had the leak, which was costing them $330,000 per year. They had been reading their meters, yes, writing down the meter readings, but nobody actually analyzed what those meter readings meant. Now, if you look to the fourth bar from the left-hand side, which shows you the water consumption at between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., and the one next to it showing you the water consumption between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., you can see that that property is actually using something in there very close to 50 cubic meters per hour. Now, 50 cubic meters per hour is 11,000 gallons per hour. And if you look at that loss, is equivalent to 264,000 gallons per day due to leaks, and the equivalent of an Olympic-sized swimming pool every 3 days. Now that's, by anybody's standards, that is massive water leaks. And the reason why the hotel was not aware of it was because they had seen the same readings coming in, just go up at certain times, which they presumed like was, you know, your peak at 6 to 8 when everybody else is up, when everybody's up showering or using the pool, the kitchens are in full swing, everything. But what nobody had realized was that at that time of the day, between 2 and 6, your water meter should not be turning at all. Even if in a 200 room, every guest decided to get up and use the bathroom, that could only account for possibly 360 or so gallons of water. If you can imagine, you only have maybe a 1.6 gallon flush toilet. So really and truly, the likelihood of that happening is very, very small. So this is where I always advise people to look at, have somebody read the water meter at 2 a.m. Read it again at 4 a.m. And that will tell you, number one, the meter, if it is moving at all, should be very, very, very tiny movement. And if it has moved significantly between 2 and 4, there is a leak somewhere. And as I say, if you can't see it and you can't hear it, the likelihood is it's in your swimming pool. And in the case of that particular hotel that I've just shown you, the auditors isolated every one of the water meters. They turned them all off and switched them back on to see which one was applying to which particular part of the hotel. And they found the water leaks, one in the cooling tower and the second in the swimming pool. Now, the importance of analyzing the findings, plotting the readings, it should be 0 or very close at 2 a.m. And from then on until activity starts again in the hotel, usually around about 6. If your meter is not working, please contact the Water Authority and report it, because we know that throughout the region, water authorities tend to be government owned, and they do not upgrade at the rate at which the other utility companies do. We know that in some of the islands and some of the countries of the Caribbean, we know that the water, a lot of the equipment and a lot of the piping and things like that are very, very old, and you know, there's in some cases water losses before they even get to the meters is in around about 60–70%. But do yourself a favor, make sure you report the fact that your water meter is not working, because one of these days the Water Authority is going to come to you and possibly hand you a bill which is a year's guesstimate based on previous usage. So it's in your interest, especially those green hotels, because that can work against you when you're Green Globe and your green certificate audits come up. Energy saving, I have some low cost, no cost energy saving opportunities, and again we have a full list available from CAST, but some of the simple, most no cost solutions simply require behavioral changes. Try and train your staff to read their own electricity bills and water bills. Teach them how to save money in their own homes by showing them the low cost, no cost energy saving opportunities. If they do this, they tend to apply those principles at work. So therefore, you will see a behavior change at work as well as at home. Here are some energy saving opportunities, which I will just pinpoint one or two of them to show you some of the suggestions that we had for a 111 room hotel. If they retrofitted their 40 watt and 60 watt incandescent bulbs with 13 watt and 10 watt compact fluorescent lamps at a cost of $3,025, the annual savings realized was in the region of $5,000 US dollars. Payback is 0.64 of a year, which is basically just over half a year. As were installation of guest room controls to set back the AC temperature when the room was unoccupied at $55,000 investment, saving of $9,500, payback of just over 5.5 years. And looking at installing new solar water heaters to replace older ones, while it's an investment of $113,000, savings of $38,000, just under 3-year payback. All of these opportunities combined produced savings which could be repaid in just over 3 years. There are another series of energy savings potentials here in percentages. From switching from incandescent to CFLs has the 75% saving. Savings of solar water heaters, units for hot water, makes savings of almost 30%. Putting in occupancy sensors on lights and exhaust in the guest rooms can make savings of up to 1.5% in some cases, and up to 16% when the guest rooms can be turned off from the outside. So if you decide to build rooms instead of investing in energy efficiency, you have to sit down and actually calculate how much it's going to cost you in terms of loss of income from the savings that could be made from the investment of energy efficiency. We calculated that in the case of a small hotel of less than 50 rooms, to avoid the energy efficiency would require an extra 3,800 room nights over a 7-year period, whereas in a large hotel, you would probably have to sell an additional 16,000 plus additional rooms to avoid the investment in energy efficiency. Obviously, the larger the hotel, the higher that gets. When you decide to go and implement energy saving opportunities, having had your audit done, talk to your local hotel association, talk to CHEA or to CHENACT, and we can advise you on who to use. If you choose a vendor yourself, please make sure the person has a reputable business and is not one of those new kids in town who thinks they know everything about energy efficiency. We have seen quite a number of them around the region. Please be aware of cheap products. They very rarely last, especially those from China, which seem to be flooding our markets. And ensure that the products are properly spec'd for your country. We have situations where products are coming into the countries, as is the case of the CFLs, are coming into countries like Barbados, where they are spec'd incorrectly. They may work perfectly in the United States, but they don't work perfectly in Barbados. And that's something that has to be checked for all the countries of the Caribbean. Yes, we have financing challenges. We are all seeing them. We do not see the commercial bankers being ready and willing to give us loans for energy efficiency, except in the case of the new builds. We also see that hotels are very heavily leveraged in some countries and cannot get loans anyway. Barbados has a smart fund which has $10 million US available to businesses who want to invest in energy efficiency, and we are proposing that one will be set up in Jamaica and the Bahamas very soon. IDB also has a risk guarantee scheme which will cover 80% of a loan from commercial banks, and further information can be gotten from me. We are also looking at energy service companies, several of whom are looking in the Caribbean and are willing to make investments in energy efficiency in hotels, and where the payback comes from the savings made from the energy efficiency implementations. Contact information is here for you. Please feel free to contact myself in Barbados, Hugh Cresser, who is the project manager covering Jamaica, and Latoya Johnson in the Bahamas. Thank you for your kind attention, and I am available for any questions or comments.